Elizabeta Popa was starving and wandering the streets of London when she accidentally bumped into him. It was Judge Augustin Mureșeanu, the most feared man in the entire city. "Excuse me, sir," she said quickly, a little embarrassed, but then, in a fraction of a second, she thought, now or never. That was the last chance of her life. She could not waste it. Without hesitation, Elizabeta dropped to her knees right there in the middle of the paved street. The stones wounded her, but she didn't care. People passing by stopped in place, a young woman kneeling before the cruelest judge in London. Something like that had never happened before. "Sir," she shouted, looking straight into his cold eyes, "I'm not worth much, but I know how to cook. It's all I have left." Augustin remained motionless, watching the scene. No one had ever humiliated themselves like that in front of him. The girl kept kneeling, hands pressed together as if in prayer. "Get up," he said in a deep voice. "Don't humiliate yourself like this." "I can't, sir. You have to listen to me," Elizabeta Popa insisted, tears beginning to run down her cheeks. "They threw me out yesterday from the house where I worked. They said I stole, but I swear I did nothing. I haven't eaten anything in 2 days. Now she was sobbing, but she continued. "I have no one in the world, nowhere to go. If you don't give me a chance, I will starve right here on these frozen streets." The people around became curious, whispering softly. Everyone wanted to see what the feared Judge Augustin Mureșeanu would do with that desperate young woman. Augustin looked at the girl kneeling there in the middle of the street. There was something about her that moved him in a strange way. Maybe it was the courage to throw herself down like that, or the way she didn't lower her gaze, even while being humiliated. "You said you know how to cook?" he asked, his voice a little gentler. "Yes, I do. I learned at the orphanage where I grew up. I'll do anything you want, sir." "Get up and follow me," Augustin said, after what felt like an eternity. "Let's see if you truly know what you're saying." Elizabeta stood up trembling, barely believing it. For the first time in months, she had hoped that things could get better. The Mureșeanu Manor in Richmond, about an hour by carriage from central London, was even more impressive inside. 3 floors of pure luxury, furniture that cost more than many people earned in an entire lifetime. Elizabeta had never seen anything like it, but she tried not to show her amazement. "Mrs. Hartulescu," Augustin called as soon as they entered. A woman appeared quickly. She had to be around 50, graying hair pinned into a tight bun, a black dress that screamed, "I run this house." Her eyes scanned Elizabeta from head to toe, with a face as if she smelled something rotten. "This young woman will do a trial in the kitchen," Augustin said, removing his top hat. "If she manages to prepare something decent, perhaps we'll have our new cook." Mrs. Hartulescu wrinkled her nose. "Sir, look at her. She doesn't even look like she knows where a stove is." "Everyone deserves a chance," Augustin replied, and the governess herself was surprised. He rarely defended anyone like that. In the kitchen, Elizabeta felt at home for the first time in months. It was an enormous space, a wood-burning stove, shining pots hanging, a wooden table in the center that looked like an altar. There she knew what to do. She asked for simple ingredients: potatoes, carrots, lamb, aromatic herbs. Her hands moved with complete certainty. She cut the vegetables into perfect pieces. She seasoned the meat as she had learned at the orphanage, adjusted the fire without even thinking. Cooking was the only thing she had always known how to do well. The smell that began to spread made Augustin stop in the doorway of the kitchen. That aroma was exactly like the stew his wife Margareta used to make in the first years of their marriage. His heart tightened hard, an ache he had tried to hide for 5 years. When it was ready, Augustin tasted in silence. The flavor carried him straight back to the happy times when Margareta was alive and the house was full of laughter. It was perfect, better than any of the 12 cooks who had come and gone after her death. "You're hired," he said without further delay. "Mrs. Hartulescu will show you your room." Elizabeta felt her legs go weak with relief. At last, After so much suffering, she had a place to stay and a chance to start over. At that moment, they heard the sound of a carriage arriving in the courtyard. Augustin frowned. "Rareș came back earlier than I expected," he murmured. "He should have stayed at Cambridge until the end of the month." Through the window, Elizabeta Popa saw a tall young man step down from the carriage, and in that same moment, she knew her life had just become much more complicated. Rareș Mureșeanu was 26, and everything his father was not. Where Judge Augustin Mureșeanu was rigid, he was spontaneous. Where the father was cold, the son radiated human warmth. Slightly tousled chestnut hair, an easy smile, a relaxed attitude that made anyone feel at ease. "Rareș Mureșeanu is my son," Judge Augustin Mureșeanu explained, and it was impossible not to notice the pride in his voice. He graduated law at Cambridge 2 weeks ago, one of the best in his class. Mrs. Hartulescu disappeared to prepare the young master's room, and Judge Augustin Mureșeanu withdrew as well, leaving Elizabeta Popa alone to get to know the house better. Translation: he wanted her to stay away from his son, but curiosity was stronger. Elizabeta Popa wandered the corridors until she came upon a library that took her breath away. Books from floor to ceiling, leather armchairs that looked like embraces, a lit fireplace casting a golden, welcoming light. She had never seen so many books in one place in her life. She approached a shelf slowly and pulled out a volume. Oliver Twist. She knew the story. She had read a worn copy in the library of the St. Agnes orphanage where she had grown up. "An excellent choice," a voice said behind her. Elizabeta Popa turned, startled, almost dropping the book. It was him, Rareș Mureșeanu. Up close, he was even more handsome. Warm brown eyes that contrasted with his father's icy green. "I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't be here," she stammered, trying to return the book. "Relax. This library exists to be used." Rareș Mureșeanu smiled, stepping closer. "You know how to read?" "I learned at St. Agnes Orphanage. The Mother Superior always said education was the only way out of poverty," Elizabeta Popa said, unconsciously touching the simple necklace at her throat, the only memory she had from her mother. Rareș Mureșeanu's eyes lit up at once. "St. Agnes, I know it well. I've already defended 3 cases of children from there in court. The Mother Superior is an incredible woman, though I know they're going through some financial difficulties." And then a conversation began that lasted for hours. Rareș Mureșeanu talked about his studies, about how he wanted to use the law to help those most in need. Elizabeta Popa talked about the children at the orphanage, about how each one was special, had their own dreams. "How many children live there?" he asked, genuinely interested. 72, from little ones of 5 to teenagers of 16. They are all my family." Rareș Mureșeanu was impressed by the affectionate way she spoke about the children. Elizabeta Popa was delighted by the passion he showed for justice. The hours passed without them realizing it. Rareș Mureșeanu completely forgot about the dinner he was supposed to have with his father. The sound of Augustin Mureșeanu's firm footsteps brought them both back to reality. "Rareș," his voice echoed through the hall. "Where are you? We have important things to discuss." The two looked at each other. A complicit smile passed between them. They both knew something very special had begun that afternoon. After the tense dinner, where Rareș barely touched his food and answered his father only with yes and no, Augustin shut himself in his office. The atmosphere was as bleak as a courtroom. Dark furniture, diplomas on the walls, legal codes piled up. Mrs. Hartulescu knocked before entering with tea. "Tell me something, Hartulescu," Augustin began, worried. "Did you notice anything strange about Rareș today?" Mrs. Hartulescu set the tray on the table carefully. 20 years in the service of that family had taught her to be diplomatic. "The young master was different, more animated, and he was an hour late to dinner," she admitted. Augustin Mureșeanu tapped his fingers on the desk, a gesture he made only when deeply disturbed. "He spent the entire afternoon talking with the new cook in the library, I heard both of them laughing from the corridor. That worries me, sir. Mrs. Hartulescu lowered her voice. The girl is beautiful, and Master Rareș has always had a soft heart for sad stories. The judge rose abruptly and went to the window. The moon lit the rose bushes Margareta had planted before she died, giving birth to Rareș. You must know something, Hartulescu, and it cannot leave this room, Augustin said, his back to her. Rareș is already engaged. Mrs. Hartulescu raised her eyebrows, surprised. What do you mean, sir? Miss Ekaterina Halmăceanu, daughter of Mr. Constantine Halmăceanu, the most powerful man in England. The marriage had been arranged 6 months earlier, when Rareș Mureșeanu was still at Cambridge. Augustin turned to face Hartulescu, his eyes shining with a frightening determination. This marriage is not just a union. It is my guarantee for appointment to the Supreme Court of Justice, my life's dream finally within reach. And young Rareș knows? Hartulescu asked, already imagining he would not find out until Miss Ekaterina arrived from Bath in 8 weeks. Until then, there can be no distractions. He spat the last word with disgust. Keep the cook busy, away from the library, away from my son. Hartulescu nodded. She knew that tone. When Augustin Mureșeanu decided something, not even God could make him change his mind. But what he did not know was that some destinies are stronger than any human plan. 4 weeks passed. Elizabeta Popa got used to the manor routine, waking before dawn to make coffee, organizing meals, keeping the kitchen shining. Mrs. Hartulescu, following Augustin's orders, invented extra tasks whenever Rareș Mureșeanu appeared nearby. But the London winter that year was brutal, cold that cracked stones, cutting wind, and a fog that never lifted. On a particularly freezing Tuesday, Rareș Mureșeanu returned from a court hearing completely soaked and shivering like a leaf. "My God, you're frozen!" Elizabeta Popa exclaimed when she saw him entering through the back door. Rareș tried to smile, but his lips were blue from the cold. It took the judge hours to decide. I waited in the rain because there was no room for all the lawyers to take shelter. "Take off your wet clothes. Now," Elizabeta Popa ordered, maternal instinct taking over. "I'll prepare a hot bath and honey tea. You can get pneumonia like this." That same night the fever came, high, violent, sending Rareș Mureșeanu into delirium between nightmares. Augustin Mureșeanu immediately called Dr. Mureșeanu, but the old doctor shook his head, worried. "It is pneumonia. In the next 3 days we'll know if he manages to overcome it. Keep him warm, lots of fluids, and pray." Mrs. Hartulescu and the other servants were supposed to take turns caring for him, but Elizabeta Popa took initiative. "I will take care of him. I know medicinal herbs I learned from the Mother Superior. She saved dozens of children from pneumonia at the orphanage." Augustin hesitated to let the cook care for his only son. It felt wrong, but the fear of losing Rareș Mureșeanu was greater than social rules. "Do whatever is necessary," he murmured, retreating to his office, where he would spend the next nights without closing an eye. Elizabeta Popa did not leave Rareș's room for 3 days and 3 nights. She brewed special eucalyptus and ginger teas. She applied cold compresses when the fever rose. She warmed blankets when chills seized him. Her gentle hands wiped sweat from his forehead. Her soft voice calmed his moments of delirium. On the second night, when the fever peaked, Rareș grabbed Elizabeta's hand with surprising strength. "Don't leave me," he murmured, eyes closed, feeling her presence. "You're the only person who truly understands me." "I'm not going anywhere," Elizabeta whispered, squeezing his hand. "Relax. Tomorrow you'll feel better." In those quiet hours, watching over his restless sleep, Elizabeta realized her feelings had completely changed. It was no longer just gratitude for her job or admiration for his kindness. It was something much deeper and much more dangerous. At dawn on the 4th day, the fever finally broke. Rareș Mureșeanu opened lucid eyes for the first time, and the first thing he saw was Elizabeta Popa's exhausted but smiling face. "You stayed here the whole time?" he asked, voice still hoarse. "Someone had to take care of you," she replied, trying to hide her emotion. In that moment, both of them knew something irreversible had happened between them. The air filled with a different tension. Their gazes lingered longer than they should, and when their hands touched, an electric wave passed between them. Rareș's recovery was quick after the fever dropped, but he could no longer stay away from Elizabeta. He invented any excuse to visit the kitchen, offering help with things that didn't even require it, and his eyes searched for her in every corner of the house. Elizabeta tried to keep the distance appropriate to her position, but it was impossible not to feel her heart jump when she heard his steps in the corridors or her hands tremble when he greeted her in the morning. The bomb exploded on a Friday when Augustin Mureșeanu returned early from a hearing and caught Rareș and Elizabeta talking in the garden. She was holding a book of poetry. He gestured animatedly, talking about social justice. They were both laughing like old friends, completely forgetting the world. "Rareș!" Augustin's voice cut the air like a knife. "A word, now." The tone allowed no questions. Rareș apologized to Elizabeta and followed his father to the office, where the door slammed with a sound that echoed through the estate. "Sit down," Augustin ordered, positioning himself behind the desk like a judge ready to pronounce a death sentence. "Father, if this is about the fact that I spoke with Elizabeta Popa—" "That is exactly what it is about," Augustin cut in, his voice glacial. "You are my only son, heir of our family, a Cambridge-licensed lawyer. She is a servant I found begging on the streets." Rareș jumped up, eyes blazing. "How can you speak like that? Elizabeta Popa is educated, intelligent. She has a heart as big as a loaf of bread. She is not just a servant." Augustin slammed his fist on the table, making everything jump. "And you have responsibilities that you have apparently forgotten." Then Augustin played his cruelest card. "Your marriage is already arranged, Rareș, with Miss Ekaterina Halmaceanu, daughter of Mr. Constantine Halmaceanu. The ceremony will take place in 6 months." The silence that followed was chilling. Rareș went pale. He grabbed the chair to keep from falling. "You can't be serious," he whispered. "Father, you can't decide my life like this." "I can, and I have already decided," Augustin replied coldly. "This marriage will secure our family a place in the highest English society and my appointment to the Supreme Court. This is the 20-year dream of my life, Rareș Mureșeanu. I will not let a distraction destroy everything." "Distraction!" Rareș exploded. "Elizabeta Popa saved my life. She is the most incredible woman I have ever known." "That is exactly what worries me." Augustin rose, walking toward Rareș with measured steps. "You are confusing gratitude with other things. Miss Ekaterina Halmaceanu is from our class. She was raised to be a gentleman's wife. What do you think a former orphan can offer besides problems?" "True love," Rareș shouted, tears shining in his eyes. "Something you seem to have forgotten exists." The indirect reference to dead Margareta hit Augustin like a punch in the stomach. His face hardened further. "You are forbidden to have any kind of personal contact with the cook," he said, with a determination that allowed no discussion. "She is here to work, that is all, and you will prepare to meet your future wife when she arrives from Bath." Rareș looked at his father with a mix of disbelief and contempt Augustin had never seen before. "I will not give her up," he declared, heading for the door. "Even if that means giving up everything." "Then you will force me to take more drastic measures," Augustin murmured when he was alone. "And you will discover what I am capable of when my plans are threatened." That same evening, under the full moon, Rareș and Elizabeta met in secret in the garden. Among Margareta's rose bushes, they declared their love for the first time, swearing that no opposition in the world could ever separate them. It was a promise that would soon be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. A month had passed since Elizabeta began working at the manor, and 4 weeks since she and Rareș met in that library. And God, how much things had changed in such a short time. They had become practically inseparable, but in secret, because if Augustin found out, there would be a terrible scandal. Every day, they found a way to meet. Early mornings, when Elizabeta prepared coffee, Rareș appeared in the kitchen under the pretext, "I want to see what today's menu is." In the afternoons, he invented that he needed a certain book from the library at the exact moment she was cleaning there. "You can't imagine how good it feels to have someone who truly understands me," Rareș whispered, holding her hand between the shelves. "With you, I can be myself, you understand? I don't have to pretend I'm the perfect son my father wants." "And I feel the same," Elizabeta answered, her heart pounding. "I never thought someone like you could like someone like me." "Stop," he said. "You are the most incredible woman I've ever known. Intelligent, brave, with a heart as big as a loaf of bread." They spent hours talking about everything. Rareș spoke about the cases he defended in court, always choosing to help those most in need. Elizabeta spoke about the letters she received from people at St. Agnes Orphanage, all those children she still considered family. "I have a crazy desire to take you there," Elizabeta said, eyes shining. "It would be wonderful to see you playing with the little ones." "One day we will go," Rareș promised, "when all this is sorted out." But how would it be sorted out, right? They both knew the situation was complicated. Augustin had already made it very clear he disliked that friendship. One of those afternoons, while they whispered in the garden, Rareș decided to say what had been on his heart for a long time. "Elizabeta, I am hopelessly in love with you. I wake up thinking about you. I spend my whole day restless, waiting for the moment I can see you." She was left breathless. She knew she felt the same, but hearing him say it was something else entirely. "Rareș, but you know it's kind of impossible, don't you? Your father will never accept it. The difference between us is too big." "To hell with the difference," he said, taking both her hands. "I'm willing to give up everything. Inheritance, the family name, everything. We can go to America and start from zero." "I can't let you do that." Elizabeta shook her head, eyes full of tears. "You have a whole life ahead, a career that will be a success." "Without you, none of that is worth anything," Rareș said, drawing closer. "Elizabeta, marry me. We'll manage somehow. We'll invent something." That's where the first kiss happened. Full of love, but also half desperate, because they both knew trouble was on the horizon. Meanwhile, Augustin was setting something in motion that would go very wrong. He had realized the innocent conversations between Rareș and Elizabeta had become serious. The way his son looked at the cook, how he always found a way to appear near her, how he was happier lately. This foolishness must end before it becomes a big problem, Augustin thought, pacing his office like a caged beast. Then an idea came to him, an idea quite sly, to be honest. The next day, he sought out a man he had used before for other special services. Viorel Popescu was a private detective, the kind who would do anything for money and ask no unnecessary questions, perfect for what Augustin needed. "I want you to find out everything about the life of the new cook," Augustin said, handing him a few gold pounds, "especially about the so-called St. Agnes Orphanage where she grew up. And I want detailed information about the place's financial situation." "Leave it to me, Your Excellency. In 10 days, I will have everything you want to know about the young lady." Viorel Popescu did not joke. He was an expert at what he did. 10 days later, he returned with information that made Augustin's eyes shine with pure malice. "It's bad there, sir. The orphanage owes exactly £450 to 3 different banks. It's a large sum of money. They try to hide it, but they are practically bankrupt." Augustin felt a cruel smile form at the corner of his mouth. £450 was indeed a fortune, impossible for a charity to obtain, and he knew exactly how to use that bomb in his favor. "Give me the names of the banks and the directors," he demanded. Viorel handed over all the information, and Augustin dismissed him with a generous payment. Alone in his office, the judge began planning his revenge. "If she wants to play Cinderella, I'll show her not all fairy tales end well," he murmured, already imagining Elizabeta's desperate face when she discovered what he could do. Over the next 2 weeks, Augustin used every contact he had in the business world, discreet meetings, favors, a little pressure here and there. It took time, but he managed to buy all of St. Agnes Orphanage's debts through intermediaries. It cost him £500, 50 more than the original debt, but it was worth every penny. Now he was the one who decided the fate of those children and consequently the fate of Elizabeta Popa. The trap was set. He just had to wait for the right moment to strike. Augustin waited a few more days before delivering the final blow. He wanted to be absolutely sure Rareș was truly hopelessly in love with Elizabeta, so the separation would hurt even more, and he was not mistaken. On Friday, he caught them embracing in the garden, right behind the roses Margareta had planted. When he saw that scene, his blood rushed to his head. How dared they stain the place where his beloved wife used to walk? Saturday morning, Augustin sent Mrs. Hartulescu to call Elizabeta to the office. Tell her it's urgent and that she must come alone. When Elizabeta entered, she found Augustin seated behind his desk with a pile of papers in front of him. He wore a small smile she had never seen before, a smile that gave her chills. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the chair. "We have some important things to discuss." Elizabeta sat, her heart already racing. Something was very wrong. "You like children, don't you?" Augustin began, shuffling papers with feigned calm. "Especially the children at St. Agnes Orphanage." Elizabeta's blood froze. How did he know? "I imagine you have a special affection for them since you grew up there," Augustin continued, his tone getting colder and colder. "It must hurt to know they're going through hardship, doesn't it?" "What are you talking about, sir?" Elizabeta stammered, already anticipating the worst. Augustin took the papers and threw them on the desk in front of her. "These are the documents for all of St. Agnes Orphanage's debts, £450 to the banks." Elizabeta took the papers with trembling hands. It was true. The debts were enormous, far greater than she had imagined. "But the most interesting part," Augustin continued, slowly rising, "is that now I am the only creditor. I bought all those debts in the last weeks. It cost me £500, but it was worth every penny." The ground disappeared from under Elizabeta's feet. She looked again at the papers and saw his signature. It was real. Augustin was the owner of all the debts. "And that means I can close that institution whenever I want," Augustin said, circling her chair like a vulture. "All those children on London's frozen streets. Can you imagine?" "What do you want, sir?" Elizabeta whispered, already knowing the answer, but praying she was wrong. "It is very simple. You have 24 hours to disappear from my son's life, disappear from London, never come back. If I see your face here after tomorrow, all those children will sleep under the open sky." Elizabeta began to cry. She had no choice. How could she sacrifice all those innocent children for her own happiness? "And don't even think about telling Rareș Mureșeanu anything," Augustin added, returning behind his desk. "If he finds out about this conversation, I close the orphanage the same day. Do you understand perfectly?" Elizabeta nodded. Tears poured in streams. She was trapped, and she knew it. Elizabeta left Augustin's office swaying as if she had been struck. 24 hours. That was all she had left to say goodbye to everything that mattered. She couldn't even pretend she was fine. Her stomach churned, her head pounded. She pushed food around her plate, trying to look normal in front of Mrs. Hartulescu and the other servants, but inside she was breaking apart. In the afternoon, she invented a weak excuse and ran to St. Agnes Orphanage. She had to see the children one last time, even knowing it would hurt terribly. The public carriage ride to the East End had never felt so long. Elizabeta looked out the window without seeing anything, her heart clenched as if it would explode. When she arrived, the children ran to her like they always did. "Eliza! Eliza!" they shouted, using her affectionate nickname. It was as if all those little souls lit up at once. "Tell us a story," little 6-year-old Maria begged, tugging at her skirt. "Teach us that word game again," 8-year-old Toma shouted. "When will you come back to live here with us?" asked Sarah, the oldest, 16. Each request was a blow to Elizabeta's heart. How could she abandon these children? How could she leave them to fate? The Mother Superior arrived smiling, but she immediately realized something was wrong. "My daughter, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Elizabeta asked to speak in private. In the mother's little office, she told part of the truth. The orphanage owed a large sum, and someone very powerful had bought all the debts, £450. The mother went pale as paper. "My God, I knew it was hard, but I didn't imagine it was that much." "How long can you stay open if you don't pay?" Elizabeta asked, already knowing the answer would be terrible. "A week, maybe 2, if luck helps us. The new creditor can revoke our license whenever he wants." Elizabeta closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision on her shoulders. All those innocent lives depended on her. How could she be selfish and choose her own happiness? "Mother, I have to leave. I can't explain why now, but I promise I will find a way to help you." When she left, all the children came to say goodbye. Elizabeta hugged each one, imprinting their faces in her memory. Maybe it was the last time she would see them. "Come back soon, okay?" Maria begged, clinging to her leg. "I will come back," Elizabeta lied, heartbroken. "Take care of each other." When she returned to the Mureșeanu manor, she had already decided. Rareș would have to believe she had never truly loved him. Elizabeta spent the whole night awake, writing and tearing letters. How do you lie to the person you love more than anything? How do you break someone's heart on purpose? When the sun rose, she finally managed to write the words that would destroy Rareș Mureșeanu. "Rareș Mureșeanu, I must tell you a truth that will hurt you deeply. Everything that happened between us was a big mistake on my part. When I arrived here, I was desperate, without a penny. I saw in you a chance to improve my life, to have a more comfortable situation. I never imagined you would take our friendship so seriously. The truth is, I never truly loved you. I like you, obviously, but true love, that, no. I made you believe it only because I wanted to secure my job here. Now I found something better, a position in a house in Bath, far from here. There is no sense continuing to pretend I feel something that doesn't exist. Please don't try to look for me. It will be better for everyone this way. Elizabeta Popa." Every word burned her as she wrote. She was lying outright, but he had to believe she chose to leave. She left the letter on the library table, where he always found things early in the morning. Then she packed her few clothes into a bundle and left the manor before sunrise. She could not bear to see his face in pain when he read those lies. Rareș found the letter the next morning and was completely devastated. He read it about 10 times, believing he was having a nightmare. It couldn't be real. Elizabeta Popa, the one he knew, was not capable of such coldness. But what if she was? For 3 days, he did nothing but reread the letter and try to understand. He even went out looking for her on the streets, asking if anyone knew of a girl who had gone to work in Bath. Nothing. Augustin appeared in his son's room on the 3rd day, pretending to be worried like a father. "My son, life goes on. Women like her are like that. They don't keep their word." "But father, I was sure she liked me," Rareș murmured, voice broken. "You are young, inexperienced with women. They know how to pretend very well when they want something," Augustin said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It's good you found out before you did something foolish." Rareș looked at his father with eyes red from crying. "Maybe you were right about her. I always want to protect you, son. That's why sometimes I'm harsh. The outside world is cruel to naive people like you." That evening, Rareș drank alone in his room, rereading the letter until he memorized every cruel word, and for the first time in his life, he began to believe his father might truly know things. 2 full months passed since Elizabeta disappeared from Rareș's life. 1 month since he stopped searching for her on the streets. 1 month since he gave up trying to understand what had happened. Rareș, who had returned from Cambridge full of dreams, had turned into a bitter man who drank too much and spoke only about work. Augustin was even a little worried about the change, but convinced himself it was an age thing, part of maturing. At least now he's focused on what matters, Augustin thought, seeing Rareș buried in files at the office until late. During that period, Miss Ekaterina Mureșeanu arrived from Bath to meet her future husband. She was 22, beautiful, well-educated, daughter of the most powerful man in England. Technically, she was the perfect bride, but when she tried to start a conversation with Rareș, she hit a wall of ice. "It's a pleasure to meet you," he said, kissing her hand without any enthusiasm. "The pleasure is mine," Ekaterina replied, trying to sound excited. "Your father said wonderful things about you." "I imagine," Rareș murmured, staring out the window as if he wanted to be anywhere else. Ekaterina tried everything. She talked about books she had read, travels she had taken, charity projects she supported. Rareș responded in monosyllables, making visible effort to be polite. Augustin watched this forced interaction with a tightening in his chest. He had managed to separate his son from the cook, but he didn't expect Rareș to become so dead inside. He just needs time to get used to it, Augustin tried to convince himself. Meanwhile, on the other side of London, Elizabeta worked hard in a filthy tavern in the East End. The place smelled of old beer and cigarette smoke. The customers were rude, and the owner paid almost nothing, but it was the only job she got without references. She worked 15-hour shifts, serving drinks, cleaning tables, enduring nasty jokes from disgusting drunks. At night, she collapsed in a tiny room above the tavern, but even then, she didn't sleep. Every night she dreamed of Rareș, dreamed he discovered the truth, came after her, fixed everything. Then she woke with her heart tight, remembering it was all an illusion. The worst was that she sent £2 from her miserable salary to the orphanage every month through a delivery boy. It was half of what she earned, but it made a difference in the children's food, leaving her to live on dry bread and water. At least they're okay, she thought, counting coins to see if she could send more. In 3 days, Rareș Mureșeanu would marry Miss Ekaterina Mureșeanu. The invitation had been published in the newspapers. Everyone talked about the union of the century. Elizabeta tried not to think about it. But how do you not think when the man you love will marry someone else? 3 days before the wedding, the Mureșeanu manor was total chaos. Servants ran back and forth. Flowers arrived. Food was prepared. Everyone was excited, except the groom. Rareș was dressed for the ceremony rehearsal, but looked more like a puppet. Impeccable suit, adjusted tie, combed hair. Outside, perfect. Inside, only empty. "You have to pretend you're happy." "At least," Augustin said, straightening his tie, "Miss Ekaterina is a wonderful girl. Any man would be proud." "I'm trying," Rareș murmured, but his face looked more like a funeral. Ekaterina arrived with her mother for the last dress fitting. The poor girl tried too hard. She attempted jokes, conversation, but it was like speaking to a door. "Rareș, what do you think of this flower color?" she asked, pointing at arrangements. "It doesn't matter." "And the music, do you have any preference?" "Any is fine." Her mother whispered, "Daughter, he must be nervous. Men are like that before a wedding." But Ekaterina was not stupid. She knew perfectly the man wanted nothing to do with her. Only now it was too late to back out. Her whole family had already come from Bath. Invitations had been sent everywhere. The bishop was hired. Meanwhile, in the East End, Elizabeta was at the tavern trying to keep herself busy. The owner sent her to the local fish market to buy ingredients for lunch. But on the way back, she could think of only one thing. In 3 days, Rareș would belong to another forever. "Hey, miss!" a drunk customer shouted when she arrived. "Where have you been? I want more beer." Elizabeta served the drink with a grimace. He was disgusting. He always tried to grab her hand, but she couldn't complain, or she'd lose her job. "You know about that high society wedding," the drunk continued. They say the groom doesn't even want it much, but he'll marry anyway because of money. Elizabeta's heart tightened. Was Rareș suffering too, or had he forgotten her already? "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, pretending indifference. "Just commenting. Those rich people are all the same. They marry for interest, not love. Unlike us, right?" That night, Elizabeta cried in secret in her tiny room above the tavern. In 3 days, she would lose Rareș forever, and Augustin was in his office toasting alone. At last, everything had worked. Rareș would marry a Mureșeanu. He would be appointed to the Supreme Court, and that problematic cook would be far from the family forever. At least that's what he believed. The next day, 2 days before the wedding, Augustin woke feeling strange, an unpleasant pain in his left arm, a tightness in his chest. Nothing serious, he thought. It must just be anxiety. He decided to go for a walk to relax before the big day. He took the private carriage and asked the coachman to stop on Bond Street, an elegant area with the best shops in London. He wanted to buy the special wedding rings he had ordered, pure gold with diamonds, each costing more than many people earned in a year. "Tomorrow my son marries a Mureșeanu," he thought, walking the sidewalk with pride swelling his chest. "And the day after tomorrow I will be appointed to the Supreme Court. 20 years I planned everything carefully. But you know how it is, right? Sometimes life plays tricks." Augustin left the jewelry shop, placing the rings in a velvet box when the chest pain returned. Only this time it wasn't light. It was as if someone drove a knife into the middle of his heart. "What the hell?" he murmured, clutching his chest. The pain grew worse and worse until he could no longer breathe properly. He leaned against the shop wall, sweating cold, the world spinning around him. The ring box fell onto the stone pavement. "Help!" he tried to shout, but his voice didn't come out. And then, thud, Augustin Mureșeanu collapsed in the middle of Bond Street at lunchtime when a crowd of elegant people were shopping. People stopped to watch, but no one knew who he was. Without his imposing posture, he was just a middle-aged man who had fallen ill in the street. "Call a doctor!" a well-dressed lady shouted. "Does anyone know this gentleman?" a merchant asked. Then one of those things happened that seems like pure fate. Elizabeta Popa was returning from the East End fish market, but took a shortcut through Bond Street because she wanted to see the beautiful shop windows, one of the few joys she had left. When she saw the crowd, she went to see what was happening. "What happened?" she asked a woman. "A man fainted. It looks like a heart problem." Elizabeta looked over the crowd's shoulder and almost dropped her fish basket. It was him, Augustin, the man who destroyed her life, who used children to blackmail her, who orchestrated everything. For a few seconds she froze. A part of her thought, "Good for him, he's paying for what he did." But then she looked at his pale face, blue lips, as if he would die right there. And something strange happened. Instead of anger or revenge, she felt pity. "Move aside," Elizabeta shouted, pushing through the crowd. "I know what to do." She knelt on Bond Street's stone pavement. She placed Augustin's head in her lap. She checked his breathing. He was breathing, but very weak. "Someone bring a doctor now," she ordered the onlookers, "and help me move him somewhere sheltered." Some gentlemen helped carry Augustin into the jewelry shop, where the owner allowed them a small back room. Elizabeta didn't know exactly why she was doing this. She just knew she couldn't let someone die in front of her, even if it was the man she hated most. The doctor arrived quickly. Bond Street was noble. It had first-class medical services. After examining Augustin, the doctor shook his head, worried. "Acute heart attack. I will have him transported immediately to the Royal Hospital." "Who are you, miss? Are you family?" "I work for the family," Elizabeta lied without hesitation. At the Royal Hospital, just minutes away by carriage, Augustin was taken directly to a private room. Elizabeta remained in the waiting room, clothes dirty with street dust, heart pounding, not fully understanding why she had involved herself. Then she heard commotion in the corridor, and suddenly Rareș appeared running. still half-dressed for a ceremony that had been interrupted when news arrived about his father. When he saw Elizabeta sitting there on that chair, he stopped in total shock. "Elizabeta," he murmured, as if seeing a ghost. "But didn't you leave to work in Bath?" She looked at him and felt her heart break again. 2 months without seeing his face, without hearing his voice. He was thinner, sadder, but still the man she loved. "Rareș, she began, but didn't know what to say. "What are you doing here?" he asked, sitting beside her, heart pounding. "I was on Bond Street when your father got sick. I helped bring him to the hospital." "You saved him?" Rareș couldn't believe it. "Why?" Because it was the right thing." Rareș stared at her, trying to put pieces together. "Elizabeta, that letter. Did you really mean all that?" She started to cry. She couldn't lie anymore. Not when he was right there. "Rareș, But the doctor appeared. "Relatives of Mr. Augustin Mureșeanu?" "I'm the son." Rareș stood. "He had a heart attack, but he will be fine. He is conscious if you want to see him." They entered together. Augustin lay pale but awake. When he saw Elizabeta, his eyes widened. "You," he whispered. "Father," Rareș said, "Elizabeta saved you. If it wasn't for her, you would have died in the street." Augustin stared at the girl he had humiliated and blackmailed, standing there after all of it. "Why?" he asked hoarsely. "Why did you save me?" "Because it was what I had to do," Elizabeta answered. Rareș looked at them both, realizing there were things he didn't know. "What is this? What are you two not telling me?" Then Elizabeta couldn't take it anymore. Tears ran, and she told everything: the blackmail, the orphanage, the £450, the threats, the false letter, every detail of Augustin's trap. Rareș grew paler and paler. "Father, is that true?" Augustin closed his eyes. "Yes." "You did that to her? You used children to blackmail her?" "I did." Rareș jumped up, fists clenched. "How could you? How could you do something like that?" "Rareș, stop!" Elizabeta tried to calm him, but emotion overwhelmed her. "You destroyed our life," Rareș burst out. "You made me believe she only wanted to use me. You left her alone working in that miserable tavern." The noise drew attention. Nurses appeared, other patients grew curious, and of course it didn't take long before the press arrived. Royal Hospital, famous judge, scandal, hot subject. A London Times reporter arrived with a photographer. "Can I speak to the one who saved Judge Mureșeanu?" "It was the young lady there," a nurse pointed. Elizabeta didn't want an interview, but the man insisted until she gave in. "What is your name, miss?" "Elizabeta." "What is your relationship to the judge?" She hesitated. How to explain such confusion? "I worked in his home." "And yet you saved him." Elizabeta looked aside. She saw Rareș still furious, Augustin listening from the bed, and she decided, enough lies. "Look, I'll be honest with you," she told the reporter. "He was not a good employer to me at all." The journalist sensed gold. "What do you mean?" He hurt me a lot. He did things that left my heart broken." "But you saved him anyway." "I saved him," Elizabeta confirmed, tears swarming. "Because holding grudges fixes nothing. Because deep down I believe everyone can change." She looked directly at Augustin. "I forgive you for everything you did to me. I hope one day you understand that love is not something you buy or sell." Rareș was moved, watching the woman he loved forgive the man who hurt her most. When the journalist left, the room fell into a heavy silence. "Father," Rareș said more calmly, "you have to explain why you did this." Augustin breathed deeply. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Losing you," his voice trembled. "When your mother Margareta died, I was terrified of losing you too. I thought if I controlled your life, chose you a wife from our class, you would be safe. But father, it was selfishness, Rareș said. Pure selfishness. I wanted my appointment to the Supreme Court, Augustin admitted. I wanted you to marry well. I wanted everything my way. Augustin looked at Elizabeta. But today, seeing this girl saving me after everything I did, I understood something. True love can't be controlled. And you chose well, my son. Mr. Augustin, Elizabeta began. Do you forgive me? He interrupted. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. In the days that followed, Augustin recovered in the hospital, and a change happened that no one expected. Rareș and Elizabeta visited together. At first it was tense, but gradually conversations became more natural. Elizabeta, Augustin said during one visit, can you do me a favor? Depends on what. Tell me about the children at the orphanage, what they're like, what they enjoy. Elizabeta was wary, but she spoke. Little Maria, who loved stories. Toma, restless but good-hearted. Sarah, who cared for the little ones like a mother. Augustin listened, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested. How many children are there? 72. And they all need help? All of them. Then Augustin did something that shocked everyone. He called his lawyer to the hospital and, in front of Rareș and Elizabeta, dictated a letter. I want you to cancel all debts St. Agnes Orphanage has toward me, £450 forgiven, and I want you to transfer another £500 into their account for renovations and improvements. Rareș was stunned. Father, are you sure? I have never been so sure of anything in my life. After the lawyer left, the three remained alone. Why are you doing this? Elizabeta asked. Because I have to do what is right at least once, Augustin replied. Augustin looked at Rareș. Rareș, I want to tell you something too. I will send a letter to Mr. Constantine Mureșeanu explaining that I am the one who cancelled the marriage, that you have no fault, and my appointment to the Supreme Court, it no longer matters. Augustin shrugged. I discovered that having a happy son is worth more than any position. Elizabeta was moved. Mr. Augustin, just Augustin, he said, and I want to ask you something. What? Marry my son officially, with a party, with my blessing. You deserve to be happy. Rareș took Elizabeta's hand. What do you say? Will you marry me again, this time without hiding? I accept, she said, smiling. I want to pay for the wedding, Augustin added. It will be the most beautiful celebration London has ever seen. They hugged right there in the hospital room. It wasn't the end of the story yet, but it already felt like things would be okay. Love had given forgiveness a chance, and forgiveness had opened the path to happiness. A week later, Augustin was discharged, but he was no longer the same man. The first thing he did was go to St. Agnes Orphanage with Rareș and Elizabeta. He wanted to meet the children he had almost harmed out of sheer cruelty. The orphanage was in the East End, far from the elegant world he lived in. The 2-hour carriage ride passed through increasingly poor neighborhoods. Augustin had never set foot in a place like that. Elizabeta! Elizabeta! The children shouted when they saw her. They ran to hug her like always. I brought some people to meet you, Elizabeta said, pointing to the two men. This is Rareș Mureșeanu I've told you about, and this is his father. Augustin was awkward. He didn't know how to behave with children. Good day, Mr. Augustin, little Maria said, tugging his trousers. Elizabeta told us you helped our orphanage. I tried to help, he stammered. Thank you. She kissed his hand and ran off. Augustin stood still, watching her play. When was the last time a child had been so affectionate with him? They're special, aren't they? Rareș said, stepping closer. They really are. They spent the whole afternoon there. Augustin watched Elizabeta telling stories. He watched Rareș playing chase with the boys. He noticed how happy the children were, even with so little. When it was time to leave, Augustin called Elizabeta. May I speak with you? They went to a corner of the garden. I want to make you a proposal, Augustin said. What if you don't return to the tavern? What do you mean? You could come back to live at our home, but now as my daughter-in-law, not as a servant. Elizabeta smiled. And what would I do there? Whatever you want. Take care of Rareș. Take care of me when I'm old and boring. Bring the orphanage children to spend weekends. You would allow that? Elizabeta asked. Elizabeta, that house has been empty since Margareta died. It needs life again. Laughter, noise, love. Elizabeta was moved. All right then. That evening the three ate dinner together at the manor for the first time, not as master and employees, but as a family. Father, Rareș said during dessert. Thank you. For what? Because you changed. Because you gave love a chance. I am not the one who should thank you, Augustin replied. You and Elizabeta taught me everything was wrong. Augustin rose and went to the window overlooking the garden. You know, Margareta planted those roses there when you were born. She said it would celebrate the day you'd bring your wife home. He turned to Elizabeta. I think she would have liked you a lot. I would have liked to know her. You're similar, good, stubborn, with a special talent for softening hardened hearts. 3 weeks after leaving the hospital, Augustin woke with an idea. He was trying to be a better father, but he was still controlling. Old habits die hard. Rareș, he called from downstairs. Come down. We need to discuss something. Rareș came down half asleep. What is it now, father? Well, I was thinking, don't you think it's time you ask Elizabeta to marry you properly? Rareș laughed. Father, we're already together. No, officially, with a ring, on your knees and all that. She deserves it. But where should I do it? St. Agnes Orphanage, Augustin suggested, in front of the children. The idea was genuinely good. Rareș went to buy a ring, but didn't want to spend a fortune. He knew Elizabeta didn't care about ostentation. He chose a simple gold band with a small but beautiful stone. That afternoon, they traveled the 2 hours to the East End. Elizabeta was there helping the children with lessons, as usual. Eliza, Rareș is here, Toma shouted, now 10 and sharper than before, running to hug him. And Mr. Augustin too, Maria added, now 8 and talkative. Augustin bent down to her. Maria, can you do me a favor? Of course. Call everyone into the courtyard. Rareș Mureșeanu will do something special. Within minutes, all 72 children were gathered, extremely curious. Sarah, now 18, helped organize the little ones. Elizabeta looked at Rareș, not understanding. What are you planning? Rareș took a deep breath. He went to the center of the courtyard where everyone could see. Kids, he said, you know I like Elizabeta a lot, right? We know, they shouted in chorus. Do you think she would want to marry me? Yes, she would, they replied, laughing. Rareș went down on one knee there, on the orphanage courtyard ground, and pulled the ring from his pocket. Elizabeta, you changed my entire life. You taught me what it means to truly love. You showed me it's worth fighting for what you believe. Will you marry me officially, with a celebration, with this whole gang as our witnesses? Elizabeta started to cry. Rareș says, yes, Elizabeta, Sarah shouted. Marry him, Toma yelled. Yes, Elizabeta answered, laughing through tears. Of course, yes. Rareș put the ring on her finger and stood to kiss her. The children erupted in cheers and ran to hug them both. The Mother Superior appeared to see what the commotion was. Congratulations, my children. God bless you. Augustin approached, still somewhat formal, but trying to be affectionate. I would like to contribute to the wedding costs, if you allow me. Thank you, Augustin, Elizabeta said. But nothing too luxurious, okay? As you wish, he agreed, already planning something beautiful in his mind. The following week, Augustin did something that required all his courage. He went personally to apologize to the Mureșeanu family in Bath. The train ride lasted 3 hours. Augustin had never traveled to apologize. Usually, he received apologies. The meeting was not easy. Mr. Constantine Halmăceanu was furious, Miss Ekaterina embarrassed, and her mother wouldn't look at him. "Mr. Mureșeanu," Constantine said coldly, "I hope you have an excellent explanation for the humiliation you caused my family." Augustin swallowed hard. "I do, and I want to sincerely ask forgiveness." He told everything, how he forced the engagement, how Rareș was never truly in agreement, how it was pure selfishness. "Your daughter deserves someone who loves her with all his heart, not an arranged marriage." Ekaterina was surprised by his honesty. "Thank you for the sincerity, Mr. Mureșeanu. Honestly, I wasn't enthusiastic either." "Ekaterina!" her mother exclaimed, scandalized. "It's true, mother. It was obvious Rareș didn't like me. We would have been unhappy." Constantine became thoughtful. "Well, at least you were honest. That means something, but there will be consequences." "What do you mean?" "My political influence. I will no longer support your appointment to the Supreme Court." "I understand," Augustin said, and surprisingly, it didn't hurt as much as he expected. "I prefer having a happy son than any position, and that is good." Ekaterina smiled for the first time. "My cousin Georgi arrived from Oxford last week. I've always liked him, but I never had the courage to say anything." When Augustin returned to London on the night train, he told the engaged couple everything. "How did they react?" Rareș asked. "Better than I deserved. The gentleman is still upset, but Miss Ekaterina actually thanked me." "Seriously?" "She's interested in cousin Georgi, by the way. It seems I did everyone a favor." Elizabeta laughed. "So everything turned out well in the end?" "Almost everything. I lost the Supreme Court, but it's worth it," Augustin continued, still a bit awkward with family matters. "I was thinking of turning the attic into a study room so the orphanage kids can come study here on weekends." "You would do that?" Elizabeta asked. "Of course. This house has been too quiet for years. It needs children's noise." It was incredible to see Augustin changing. Not perfect, still stubborn and formal at times, but trying. The wedding day arrived splendid, though not without mishaps. St. Paul's Cathedral was beautifully decorated, but the florist was 2 hours late. 3 orphanage children woke with stomach aches, and Augustin was nervous. "Father, relax," Rareș said, fixing his tie. "Everything will be fine." "And if Elizabeta changes her mind?" "She won't," Rareș soothed. Elizabeta woke at the orphanage where she spent her last night as a single woman. The older girls helped her prepare, but nothing went perfectly. "Eliza, your hair won't stay in place," Sarah complained, fighting hairpins. "Leave it looser," Elizabeta laughed. "It doesn't have to be perfect." The dress was simple but beautiful. White fabric, long sleeves, a skirt that spun just right. Augustin offered something more luxurious, but she chose what fit her. "I have something for you," the Mother Superior said, bringing a small box. "What is it?" "It was your mother's. I kept it, waiting for the right moment." Inside was a delicate necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. Elizabeta was moved. She recognized the small necklace she always wore when she was little, but never knew it belonged to her mother. "She wore it at her wedding," the mother said. "She wanted you to wear it one day too." Elizabeta touched the necklace at her throat, remembering how it always felt there. "Thank you for keeping it for me." In the church, Rareș waited, nervous. Augustin stood beside him, tense too. "Son, are you sure about all this?" "Father, you've asked that 5 times, I'm sure." The music began and the doors opened. The children entered first, throwing petals. Maria tripped and spilled all the petals at once. Toma ran too fast and reached the altar early, but everyone was happy anyway. When Elizabeta appeared on the mother's arm, Rareș felt he might faint. She was radiant, smiling in that way that made his heart pound. Her mother's necklace shone delicately at her throat. "Take care of each other," the mother said, placing Elizabeta's hand into Rareș's. The ceremony was beautiful, with its moments. Toma started crying during the service because he needed the bathroom. One of the little kids made noise, and Augustin was so emotional he almost forgot to hand over the rings. During the vows, Rareș spoke from the heart. "Elizabeta, you taught me true love means choosing someone every day. I promise to choose you always, to make you laugh when you're sad, and to be the best man I can be." Elizabeta cried but managed. "Rareș, you showed me I deserve to be loved. I promise to love you with everything I have, to support you always, and to build a beautiful life with you." When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," everyone applauded. The children shouted with joy. Augustin was more moved than he expected. Outside, instead of rice, rose petals rained down, petals the children had gathered. Sweet scent filled the street. The reception took place at the manor, decorated with taste and a certain ostentation Augustin couldn't fully avoid. Good food, music, everyone danced. The funniest part was seeing Augustin trying to interact with the children. Him, always serious, now sitting on the floor trying to understand their games. "It was beautiful, wasn't it?" Elizabeta said, dancing with Rareș. "Perfect, exactly our style. And your father is trying so hard." "He is. It's not easy for him, but he's trying." That was what mattered. Not perfection, but sincere effort to be a family. The first months of marriage were a big adjustment. Elizabeta moved into the manor, still getting used to the luxury. Rareș tried balancing work and married life. And Augustin was learning to share space and not stick his nose into everything. "Elizabeta," he said one morning, "don't you think you should arrange the garden differently?" "Father," Rareș interrupted, "let her do what she wants." "I'm just suggesting." "Interfering," Rareș corrected, without malice. Augustin sighed. "Will you be patient with me? I'm trying to change, but it's hard." "Yes, we will," Elizabeta smiled, "but you have to let us live our life." The orphanage children came every weekend as agreed. Big mess, but a good mess. The house filled with life, laughter, noise. Maria, now 8, loved playing in the garden. Toma, 10, became a little lawyer, asking 1,000 questions. Sarah, 18, helped care for the little ones. Augustin still didn't know how to handle such commotion, but he learned. "Mr. Augustin," Toma shouted during one visit, "teach us chess." "Chess? Aren't you too small?" "We're not. Sarah already knows." Augustin ended up spending the whole afternoon teaching them. He wasn't a born grandfather, but he tried. "See?" Elizabeta told Rareș. "He just needed a little push." A few months later, Elizabeta discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous to tell. What if it was too early? What if something went wrong? Rareș said one evening, "You have to tell me something." "I'm pregnant." Rareș went silent for a few seconds, processing, then burst into joy. "Really? We're having a baby?" "Yes." When they told Augustin, he became more nervous than the parents. "And if something goes wrong?" "Shh, father," Rareș calmed him. "Nothing will go wrong. Medicine has advanced a lot since Mother Margareta." Augustin breathed deeply. "You'll give me a real grandchild?" "Yes, we will. Then I'll have to learn to truly be a grandfather." During the pregnancy, Augustin became the most caring man. He constantly asked if Elizabeta was okay, if she needed anything, if she wasn't overexerting. "Augustin," Elizabeta laughed one day, "stop treating me like I'm fragile." "I'm afraid." "I know, but everything is fine. The doctor said I'm excellent." Rareș watched his father's change with affection. Not perfect, still with his oddities and fears, but sincere effort. When labor arrived, the house turned into total chaos. Elizabeta started contractions in the middle of the night. Rareș was extremely nervous, and Augustin was worse than both. "Rareș, stop pacing," Augustin said. "You're making me dizzy." "I can't stop, and if something goes wrong, everything will be fine." Augustin tried to sound calm, but inside he prayed. Margareta's death in childbirth still haunted him. Dr. Mureșeanu arrived with the most experienced midwife in London. They stayed upstairs for hours that felt like eternity. Now and then a cry of pain made Rareș want to run upstairs. "God, she's suffering," he murmured. "It's normal," Augustin said. "It's part of it." Then they heard the cry, a strong, healthy cry echoing through the manor. The two men looked at each other, emotional. "You became a father," Augustin said. The doctor came down minutes later. "Congratulations. A beautiful, healthy baby girl, and the mother is doing very well." Rareș ran upstairs. He found Elizabeta in bed, exhausted but happy, holding a tiny baby. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. Rareș approached slowly. The daughter was tiny but perfect. She had her mother's eyes and her father's nose. "She's wonderful," he murmured, touching her little hand. "Do you want to hold her?" Carefully, Rareș took his daughter. She was so light, so fragile. "Hello, Princess. I'm your father. I'll take care of you forever." Augustin appeared at the doorway, hesitant. "May I?" Rareș handed the baby to the grandfather. Augustin took her with trembling hands. "My God," he whispered, "she's perfect." "What will we name her?" Rareș asked. Elizabeta and Rareș looked at each other. "Margareta," they said together, in honor of the first wife, and because it meant pearl, their little pearl. Augustin was moved. "Margareta. And her second name will be Hope," Elizabeta added. "Margareta Hope Mureșeanu." Hope. The baby opened her eyes and looked at her grandfather as if she knew he would protect her. "Margareta would have been happy," Augustin murmured. "Very happy." Holding his granddaughter, he felt he finally found the peace he had searched for so long. "Thank you," he told them both. "For what?" Elizabeta asked. "For giving me a chance to be a grandfather, to be part of a real family." Little Margareta fell asleep in her grandfather's arms, and Augustin knew that from then on he would do everything possible to be the best grandfather he could be. 2 years later, on an ordinary Sunday, life at the manor had become a pleasant, noisy routine. Margareta was already walking and saying a few words, always running after her grandfather. "Grandpa, Grandpa!" she shouted, arms out. Augustin melted every time. "Come here, little one." In the garden, he sat with Margareta in his arms. Rareș played with the orphanage children who came for the day. Maria, now 10, had become clever. Toma, 12, dreamed of becoming a lawyer like Rareș. Sarah, 20, found work in a good home and visited often. Elizabeta watched from the veranda with a hand on her belly. The second baby was on the way, but this time she was calmer. "Grandpa, tell a story," Margareta asked in her sweet voice. "What story do you want?" Augustin smiled. "Once there was a brave girl who told a grumpy man, 'I'm not worth much, but I know how to cook.'" Margareta loved this story, even if she didn't fully understand yet. And then, the grumpy man discovered she was worth more than all the gold in the world. The Mother Superior arrived in the evening to take a few children back, as she always did. The orphanage was much better now. With the money Augustin donated, they renovated everything and even hired more teachers. "How is the pregnancy?" she asked Elizabeta. "Good. Now that I know the first went well, I'm calmer." "And Mr. Augustin as a grandfather?" Elizabeta laughed, completely enchanted. Margareta can do whatever she wants with him. What a transformation, isn't it? Total. He still has his stubborn moments, but he changed so much. When the children left, the family ate dinner together. Margareta in the high chair, making a mess with food. "Daddy, more," she said, tapping her spoon. "Please." Rareș taught her, "Please." Everyone laughed. The girl had a strong personality, like her mother. "You know," Augustin said, "I can't believe I managed to be happy again." "Why didn't you believe, Grandpa?" Margareta asked, always curious. "Because I thought I lost this chance forever." "But you didn't lose it." "I really didn't," Augustin smiled. "Thanks to your father and your mother." Elizabeta held Rareș's hand. We met at the right moment. At the moment we needed it, Rareș agreed. After dinner, they stayed on the veranda, watching the sunset. Margareta played in her grandfather's arms, and the couple embraced. Sometimes, Elizabeta said, I think about that day I met you on the street. If I had known that it would be worth every tear, every suffering. Augustin looked at them, then at his granddaughter. You taught me something important. What? That family doesn't mean blood or money. It means choosing to love people every day. Rareș smiled. And that sometimes someone who seems to be worth nothing is worth more than all the gold in the world, Elizabeta and Augustin said together. Margareta clapped without understanding, but happy to see everyone smiling. Did you like this story? Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Until next time.